Hi, my name is Ria Devani, and I would like to share my journey into the lives of neurologically impaired children and their families in Kenya. For many years, society has dictated what is perceived to be normal. What is normal? Who is normal? The entire definition of normal is nothing but a perception. In this short documentary entitled It's All in the Mind, I'd like to showcase how these neurologically impaired children are not so different from society perceived normal children. Like any other child, they have feelings, they have needs, they have emotions. It's just that they show and portray these in a different manner than what we normal people would. Since time immemorial, we as a society have been besieged with norms, rules and protocols, and those that do not fit into the fold are stigmatized. Unfortunately, what we do not realize is that the same members we stigmatized with labels were part of us, and that one of the main reasons we shunned them was not because they were different, but more so because we were ignorant. The neurological and physical impaired have not been spared from being shunned and stigmatized. Within the Kenyan community, they were considered cursed, and many families believed that their loved ones afflicted with this condition because of witchcraft, uchawi. With the advancement of medicine and education, this belief has dwindled, but sadly not eliminated, and as such, the stigma still looms over them. In Kenya, the neurologically impaired have to overcome so many hurdles to try and even attain a somewhat decent life. The combination of stigmatization, lack of affordable education and medical facilities, inadequate infrastructure, financial constraints are amongst the many hurdles they face. As a result, integration into the community at large is a challenge to them due to them being poorly equipped. Over the last decade or so, one can see that there has been a change in the awareness and the inclusion of neurologically impaired children. The government has made many changes in the educational system to cater for them. In 2009, the government published the National Special Needs Education Policy Framework to try and eliminate the disparities and enhance equal learning facilities for all. In theory, the policy is good, but one can see that it is not being followed fully. As per Ms. Halima of Pwani School for the Mentally Challenged, the government has made great strides towards ensuring that neurologically impaired children receive an education. One of the biggest hurdles we have faced is the availability of trained teachers, specifically for special needs. In the past, there was only one training institution, the Kenya Institution of Special Needs in Nairobi. Though now we have a lot more specialized courses and centers where teachers can get trained, there is still a lack of specialized teachers. Many teachers in mainstream schools do not have an idea of how to detect a child who has a disability and who requires further or specialized assistance. While some schools are attempting to understand special needs, a lot still needs to be done. But according to Ms. Diane Roof of Angel and Earth, there has been a notable change in the 3 years or so in the mindsets of teachers towards understanding special needs and disabilities. Mr. Vincent from Sapling Trust Foundation also gave a similar view when it came to teachers in mainstream schools. According to him, the majority of teachers do not know how to accommodate special needs students and have a major problem in being able to identify them. To be able to tackle this issue of teachers in mainstream schools not being qualified enough to detect if a child has a disability, the government needs to develop a well-stated policy specifically for children living with disabilities that all teachers must understand so that they are able to successfully identify if a child has a condition that requires specialized attention. Additionally, the government needs to deploy special needs teachers into mainstream schools to train the other teachers on how to manage a child with minor conditions and how to detect if a child has a condition that needs to be dealt with by specialists. However, as per Vincent, getting such a policy is difficult as there is minimal involvement in the government in special needs. The government provides a syllabus for learning. However, the centers still need to modify that syllabus as all the learners have different abilities and this have to be catered to accordingly. Though the government is making efforts for the inclusion and the integration of special needs children, it is still too little and too slow. While the government is making its effort. We as a society also need to do our part. One of the many hurdles children with neurological impairments face is the discrimination and stigmatization. According to Halima, many families still shy away from taking their special needs child out. For example, many parents will not take their challenged child out to the supermarket for fear of how the community will react. Many of times, parents and families are in denial that their child suffers from a condition. And instead of seeking help, they lock and hide the child away. Hiding and locking them has adverse effects, notably denying them the fundamental right to interact with others, to learn and to gain knowledge, to grow and to develop. As a community, we need to show our support towards these families and eradicate the fear that the parents have that special needs children are an embarrassment. By embracing them as a part of the community will mean that these children will receive some of their basic rights, such as education. They will get a chance to develop skills that are necessary for them to try and become independent. Skills that you and I take for granted. Bathing, using the washroom, combing our hair, brushing our teeth. As Miss Diane Rook from Angels on Earth believes that there needs to be change in the perception that a special needs child is a burden. This perception blinds families and society at large and renders them unable to see the child within the special needs child. She believes that the lack of understanding of disorders and impairments shapes how we as a society deal with special needs. Not everyone in society wants to shun people with special needs, but who just don't know how to help them or even how to interact with them. This is something that I saw when I spoke to Mr. Gona, a father of 5. Despite caring for his youngest daughter for the last 8 years, he and his wife are clueless of what is wrong with her, what exactly is her condition. As he says, "All I know is that she is my child. She can't talk, she can't eat on her own, and she can't go or tell when she needs the washroom." When asked how her siblings interact with her, he laughed and said that they don't. They can't understand her, nor can they understand why she is the way she is. They don't play with her, they keep away from her. People who don't understand the conditions perpetuate a negative perspective of people with disabilities and thus deny them the right to be a part of society, as society cannot and sometimes will not accommodate them. Ignorance fuels the discrimination which affects them throughout their childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, where they can be denied jobs and employment due to their conditions. This ignorance causes people to grow up with negative notions on impairments, and the lack of knowledge means that the community at large will not be able to understand the scientific reasons behind the condition, but rather believe that the superstitions and myths. This drives people to believe that the children with neurological impairments are a result of bewitchment and uchawi. Only 20% of Kenyans have the knowledge of these conditions. This means that the majority of the Kenyan community is unaware of the impairments, and thus the myth that special needs children are cursed can be spread faster. This leads to deaths because those who believe that the child is cursed will kill that child. According to Mr. Vincent, the only way to solve this lack of awareness and ignorance is through the media. The media needs to spread information about neurological conditions. We need to inform the public that children who have impairments are not cursed and that they deserve the fundamental human rights and to be treated equally. Neurologically impaired children face yet more additional challenges compared to physically impaired children, according to Ms. Batul Chakera of Cerebral Palsy Foundation. There is a lot of stigma associated with neurological impairments as compared to those that are more physical. This is because that impairments that mainly affect physical development are easy to see and identify. This makes it easier to understand as it is evident as compared to neurological ones that do not have many effects on physical development. For example, autism, a condition where you cannot be able to identify if someone has autism based on their physique. The fact that you cannot see these neurological impairments makes it even more difficult to understand them. According to Mr. Peter Muteti, a father of 3, before their first child was diagnosed with autism, they had never heard of the condition before. Their first child was diagnosed with autism when he was 3 years old. Physically, he was okay, but he was unable to speak. He could not formulate his own words. Initially, this did not concern them, but with that time they realized there was something wrong and sought medical help, where he was diagnosed to be autistic. The fact that they had never heard of autism before resulted in their family seeking knowledge in the condition. Their son's impairment made them go out and understand the condition. This opened their eyes and brought enlightenment, which helped them deal with not only their firstborn, but also their secondborn, who was also diagnosed with severe autism. The main challenge that they faced was the way the community perceived their children. The condition of autism is a phenomenon that is at least known in Kenya. When an autistic child is uncomfortable, they shriek. For example, if at the supermarket the child wants something but cannot have it, they will shriek and throw a tantrum, or if in church the child just cannot sit still. This caused people to look down at them and caused people to make the assumption that the child are misbehaved and the parents do not know how to discipline them, when in fact it is because of a disorder that they have that causes them to act like that. The lack of understanding on autism and the behavior that autism has causes people to make assumptions and judge parents and children with autism. This ignorance and judgment from the community is what results in other parents being too ashamed or too embarrassed to take their autistic children out. Another major challenge that they faced was a constant worry about whether their children is safe. Since children with autism have difficulty in processing certain things, and sometimes they just do not have fear, this causes them to be very reckless and put themselves into dangerous situations. And Mr. Peter admitted it was very difficult because on one hand, you can't lock them away. You want them to experience the world and have fun. But at the same time, you know that they could get seriously hurt or put themselves in danger if left alone. Mr. Peter also shed light about one major impact of ignorance. Since there's very little information about autism, and many children have autism, many parents and families do not recognize the seriousness of the symptoms their child might have. For example, children who have delayed speech. Parents who do not understand that this could be a symptom of autism will believe that their child will pull through and eventually they will start talking. But this might not be the case. By not registering the symptoms early, parents are knowingly hindering their child from improving their condition and getting specialized and comprehensive care for their condition. More parents need to understand autism so that they can get treatment and therapy for their children. This will help them grow and to develop. Whilst having a child with autism did not change their lives drastically, there were obstacles that they faced as a family. The first was in relation to the diet. While research and the specialists that I've spoken to have enforced that a controlled diet is very crucial, Mr. Peter found it difficult to implement a new diet. Mr. Peter informs that since autistic children are very sensitive to change, introducing a completely new diet was very difficult as the child themselves would not want certain foods and would refuse to adapt to the diet. According to medical surveys and research, certain foods trigger hyperactivity in children, while others soothe and calm the children down. Thus, diet plays an integral role in the well-being and improvement of an autistic child's condition. However, many families are unaware or choose to ignore this and rely more on medical intervention and drugs to make things better for the autistic child. Apart from ignorance or denial of the role controlled diet plays for the well-being of an autistic child, many families find it difficult to implement this due to the fact that it means additional financial costs to cater for one person. It has also led to sibling rivalry, as the other children feel that their autistic sibling is being favored by getting different food. Apart from all the other obstacles families face, financial burden is one of the biggest demoralizing aspects that they encounter. Unfortunately, the government rarely supports people. However, if a person registers with the National Council of Persons with Disabilities, then the government pays a small fee to help. Furthermore, while the government may be allocating money for the special needs department, little of it actually goes to the people with disabilities. From medical expenses to special and private education to a special diet regime and of course other equipment that they might require, such as wheelchairs, feeding tubes, all these put a huge burden on the families. Besides just focusing on the challenges and the obstacles that the families who have children with impairments face, the specialists brought to their attention the challenges that the children themselves face. One challenge that can arise is in relation to mental illness. because the children themselves do not understand what is going on, and generally no one explains the situation to them, even though most of the time they can be able to understand what's going on. They develop depression and other psychological or mental illnesses. Additionally, children with learning impairments such as dyslexia can also become depressed or get low self esteem because their needs are not catered to. In many mainstream schools, if a child has a learning disability, they are most likely not acknowledged and the student is made to feel as if they're just not smart enough. This affects their confidence and self esteem and can also result in the development of mental illnesses, as well as deteriorating their mental health. My journey, it's all in the mind, began many moons ago. During my childhood, part of our social family friends were two boys, Kavit and Here. For the best part of my childhood, Kavit and Here were always there. Be it a fun day out on the beach, camping, a fundraising event, birthday parties, and all that time, I never thought twice that they were different from me. These two boys were always in wheelchairs, were fed sometimes by tubes, but they were part of the circle. It was only much later in life that I began to question and hence my journey. It was during the start of this journey that I realized in all those years I spent with Kavit and Here, I had never heard their voices. It took me a lot of courage to call Miss Kilna and ask her if she'd speak to me and for me to explain how she and her boys inspired me to make this journey. Kavit and Here both suffered from a rare condition called microcephaly, a condition where the baby's head is much smaller than it should be. Generally, during pregnancy, a baby's brain grows when the head grows. Thus, in this case, the brain is underdeveloped. This underdevelopment causes seizures, development delays, intellectual disabilities, problem with movement, feeding problems, difficulty to swallow, hearing loss, and vision problems. Kavit was born with an eye without a pupil. Medics in Kenya had advised the parents that he would need a cornea transplant, and when he was 2 months old, and despite being underweight, the surgery was scheduled. It was the most horrifying time for Kilna and Jitan. Kavit did not come out of anesthesia, and the doctors had to resuscitate him. And it was at this stage that the medics in Kenya had to admit that there was much more to Kavit's condition and that they did not have the expertise or experience to deal with it. It was then when they took Kavit to London, and having had to spend time in the intensive care unit, was Kavit finally diagnosed as suffering from microcephaly. Having never heard of this condition, it was nerve-wracking for Kilna. She did not know what to do next. Despite the doctors training her on how to manage his condition, feed him via tubes, maintenance of tubes, and general basic care guidelines, Kilna was apprehensive if she would manage or she would need to hire a nurse. On their return to Kenya, life did not get any easier for them. Medics here did not have any knowledge of his condition, so were only able to give him basic help. Also, due to his condition, he suffered from epileptic fits, and the doctors would try and treat that condition rather than seeing that it was a symptom of his microcephaly. Apart from the lack of adequate medical help, Miss Kilna had to deal with a lack of proper medical supplies, like the correct size tubes for his feeding. Life for them did not get any easier. Apart from medical challenges that they faced each day, they had to contend with the fact that this was the journey and this was their journey and their fight, as most Kenyans had never even heard of this microcephaly before. There were no support groups they could turn to for help, advice, or even comfort. Society also was not that welcoming, as they did not understand the condition, and many questioned their judgment, especially when they had another child, and he too unfortunately was born with the same condition. Initially, the couple decided that they would not expand their family. However, several consultations with medics all over the world, they were given strong hope that with medication during conceivement period and throughout the pregnancy, the chances of having a second child with the same condition were too slim to almost none. It was a 1 in a million chance. Having Kavit with microcephaly had already put a financial strain on the couple, and then having Here with the same condition was even more taxing for them financially, as they still had to source a lot of the medicines, equipment from England. They also now needed to get professional help such as a physiotherapist, as they could not manage to all that was required for the two boys by themselves. Due to their conditions, hospitals became a second home for Kavitan here, as they were more susceptible to infections. However, despite all the hurdles and the struggles, they ensured to try and give their boys a life they would have had if they were not born with microcephaly. They never left their boys home, took them everywhere. The beach, camping trips, safaris, birthday parties, you name it, they were there. A distinct memory I have is attending his birthday party and passing the parcel. And even though he did not understand much, we played the party games with him. But as Ms. Kilna says, it was not easy. They were subjected to criticism, ridicule from some society members, at many occasions other children who did not understand the boy's condition, and of course were naturally curious, would ask questions which were blunt and brought forward the perception that they were not normal. In the initial years, these questions were very difficult for them. They found them intrusive and hurtful, but they still managed to answer them with a smile on their face, whereas deep inside they were crying and tearing up. But as she says, with time, things became a bit easier as people became more aware of neurological impairments. And today, he's a drastic change in the way society views neurologically impaired children. There is more awareness and more support. Also, with the government taking steps to include them in the education problem, there are more support and counseling groups around. And most importantly, there are designated schools with specialized teachers for them. However, despite the change in attitude, stigmatization is not 100% gone. Nor can we say that the awareness within the country is at the level that it should be. This is something I have seen firsthand through this journey. The way to combat the ignorance is to create awareness. This should be done through the media, spreading more information on the conditions. Hospital needs to prepare mothers for all these conditions. The government needs to have special needs department in all governmental schools and hospitals. More support groups need to be created for the different conditions because each condition requires different approaches to managing children. And lastly, teachers need to be much more aware on special needs. Kenya has a lot to improve on, and a lot of change needs to be implemented in the near future to be able to create equality and inclusiveness for special needs children. The stigmatization, the taboo, it needs to be eradicated. More people need to be informed about these conditions. Hospitals and professionals need to also be more aware of rare conditions. Special needs schools need to have better equipment and facilities. The government needs to allocate more attention to disabilities. And lastly, we as a society, as a Kenyan community, need to rid ourselves of the internalized prejudice against disabled people and welcome them and embrace them into our society. Disabled or now differently abled people, adults, children, are human beings deserving of equality, equity, respect, and love. It is up to us as Kenyans, as a society, to make a change. Join me and let's make the change.